This is the E-Commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. It is great to have you along for the ride with us today. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome my newest guest to the podcast, Bobby McKinnon from Deliverlitics. Welcome, Bobby.
Thanks for having me on, Jason.
It's my pleasure to have you along for the ride today with me. And you said you are dialing in from the great state of Indiana.
That's right. Go Hoosiers.
There we go. And you're right in the heart of it in Indianapolis.
Yep, absolutely.
Wow, Indianapolis Super Speedway down the road there. As I mentioned off air, I've got a friend that lived in Indy. I think it was for 10 or 15 years, and I visited him there a number of years ago. And I found Indy to be a super cool town. Lots to see, lots to do, lots of history, easy access to lots of other things outside of Indy from Indianapolis. It's a really cool place, man.
Yeah, great fun city. Both major sports teams have their stadiums in the city, downtown, like a mile and a half from each other. So super walkable to move around and do basically whatever you want.
And honestly, I think the weather has also got more temperate over the years. Like Indiana used to be known as a place that got, especially in wintertime, got pretty darn cold, could get snow, things like that. But as I understand it, it's become definitely go global warming. It's definitely become more temperate over the last few years.
Yeah, it's also it's a sunny cold. So right now I'm staring out this window. It's sunny, couple of white puffy clouds. It's also 17 degrees outside. So even when it's cold, it's not somehow if you can still see the sun, it doesn't feel as dreary and as bitter.
It's not depressing, at least.
Yeah, exactly. It's not some of the Great Lakes towns. I got a lot of friends there, and it gets you can see the sun for 3-4 months. It gets pretty rough.
Yeah, or you could be in the UK, you could be in London and be depressed for 6 months of the year.
That is also true.
Listen, yeah, look, we're both in very nice places. I'm now based in Puebla City, Mexico, and it ranges between about 15 and 35 C year round here. So it's basically equivalent to San Diego. It's almost exactly the same weather as San Diego. So I got no complaints about our weather here. We sit at about 2,000 meters of elevation, which keeps the humidity down compared to lots of other places in Mexico. So I got zero complaints about our weather here. But we're not here to talk about the weather. We're here to talk about you. We're here to talk about Deliverlitics. We're here to have a great conversation about this technology that you and your team are building. But before we get into that, how did you even come to be in this world of e-commerce logistics? Tangentially, that's what your technology works with, and we'll get into that and what it does and how it does it. But how did you come to be in this industry in the first place?
I think probably like most people, I just found myself here one day. I was a military officer for the first 5 years of my career. At undergrad, I did ROTC, and then I became a logistics officer in the Army. Spent, like I said, a little over 5 years doing that. Got out, didn't know anything about anything. My family's all like basketball coaches, and no one has had a real job in like 60 years. Yeah, I didn't know what people did for a living. So I decided to go to grad school, went to the University of Virginia to Darden, did an MBA there for 2 years. While I was there, I interned with Nike. I was a big sneaker collector when I was a kid. I was one of those 14-year-olds that would show up at a skate shop at 3 a.m. and pull out of the sleeping bag until they opened so I could buy a pair of Dunks because I wear a size 13 and like they would only get one pair in my size. So if I wasn't the first dude over 6 feet in line, I would just pack it up and go home. And so I somehow finagled my way into a job over there, got put onto their post-purchase customer experience team for Nike.com in North America, had an amazing 3 months there. After grad school, decided that Nike kind of felt too much like the Army to me. It was a little too big, a little too corporate. I wanted to explore what small businesses and startups felt like. So I went to a crypto AI startup that was working on essentially like fraud monitoring and risk monitoring for banks and financial institutions that would accept payments. So you can think of scanning for illicit source of funds, terrorism financing, making sure that you're not taking on those kinds of funds that would get you in trouble with a Treasury Secretary or some of those different organizations, and learned a lot about machine learning, AI, how it all works under the hood there. And then I met a group of guys that were running a bunch of D2C e-commerce companies that had this huge issue with delivery fraud. And I knew that you could use the stuff that I was doing in the blockchain space combined with my understanding of it from my time at Nike. I just thought this is the opportunity that like fell out of the tree, so to speak, and decided to start a company with those guys. And we've been going strong now for a little over a year and really excited with where we're at.
Wow, super cool story. And yeah, I think most of us that have ended up in the e-commerce or digital space or anything related to that, e-commerce enablement technology, which is effectively what I would consider your technology. It's very interesting the routes we all take to get here. And as someone for me, like me, that I never even went to university. So the reality is that we all come through different routes to this industry. And I've been in it over 24 years now. So it gets in your blood and it's really difficult to get rid of it. And I think for me, at least, one of the main reasons why I've stuck at it for so long is the incredible people in the industry and the friendships I've made, the professionals. Oftentimes they'll start out as professional friends, industry friends, whatever. And then a lot of those have turned into very close personal friends on the backside of that. So it's a very cool, tight-knit space to work in, and that's what I like about it the most. You go to conferences and you see the same people over and over again, and you develop these friendships and relationships that are oftentimes very supportive. And it takes a village. It takes a village to succeed. No man or woman is an island, and the reality is it takes a village for us all to win at this game we call e-commerce and digital. So now, if we think about the problem set that your technology, Deliverlitics, is designed to address, I think you say it pretty well on your website in this one succinct line. There's over $10 billion in lost packages every year and rising. And you basically call out with Deliverlitics, you can tap into past shipment and delivery claim data quickly, identify and take necessary precautions on risky transactions before they happen. So this is a proactive technology, not a reactive technology. And I guess ultimately, at the end of the day, this isn't just about business efficiency. This isn't just about delivery claims management, but this is ultimately designed to create a better delivery experience and a more proactive delivery experience for your customers that are receiving those parcels, right?
I have never heard anyone explain it as well as you have. I should hire you to do my sales and be on my calls. That was perfect. I think one of the things like I try to stress all the time is like the business efficiency stuff is good and it's helpful to make the business case right. If you're going to buy any sort of B2B technologies, you have to show some sort of tangible ROI, right? It can't all be ethereal. The thing that like drives me and the thing that I care about is the consumer experience. That's the world I'm coming from, right? Like to your point, you think about all of the really interesting technology that goes into building really awesome products, right? If you were to interview somebody from the R&D lab at Nike and you talk to them about the newest pair of Fly Ease shoes that they made for toddlers, they'll spend millions of dollars, thousands and thousands of hours of people's time to create this amazing product. You market it so effectively, you create a great brand, you get it out into the world, and then somebody doesn't come back to buy it again or doesn't refer you to a friend because their package got stolen or it was 10 days late or like you gave them a bad experience in some way and you've just like a very simple operational failure has just nuked all this incredible hard work that you've done. And that's the stuff that pulls brands apart at the seams over time. And if you're going to take the time and put your heart and soul into building an unbelievable product and brand, then you should be executing on the customer experience that you get people coming back and telling their friends about it and doing all the things that are going to help you from a business perspective sustain the passion and the thing that drove you to create the product in the first place.
To your point, it's been said, and I totally agree with this statement, that most of e-commerce is really just logistics with a pretty face put on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the reality is that, like you say, it's the stuff of nightmares when logistics doesn't go right for brands. And there's actually so little that they have control over, especially once it leaves either their warehouse or the 3PL's warehouse or contract manufacturer's warehouse or whatever it is. When it leaves on that first mile, right, after it leaves their hands, they could have done everything right to that point from a design and a quality control perspective, from a packaging perspective, from a pick, pack, dispatch perspective. They could have done everything right up to that point. But if anything fails as part of middle or last mile delivery, then it was all for naught, right? Because it leaves a really bad taste in the customer's mouth. So it is the stuff of nightmares for brands when logistics goes wrong. And I think what you're pointing out through your data is that it goes wrong probably more often than a lot of brands would like to acknowledge or admit. And having tools and solutions in place to deal with that eventuality, which will happen. It's not an if, it's a matter of just when and how often it's going to happen to you. It's about how are we turning this into a proactive opportunity to leave an extra lasting positive impression in our customers' minds instead of leaving them with a horrible taste in their mouth.
Exactly. Like the whole proposition of e-commerce was around convenience, right? Which speaks to the customer experience. Like I don't have to get up, get dressed, go to the mall, walk through a horde of people to go to the thing, and maybe they don't have the size of the thing I wanted, right? That could end up in a bad experience for me. So the idea of e-commerce makes a lot of sense. Like we're going to give you direct access to the inventory. You're going to be able to purchase it at like the tip of your thumb. And somehow over the last like 4 or 5 years, the experience has degraded for the consumer to where if you look at a lot of survey data, folks will tell you that the in-store experience is better. And it's okay, the value prop, this is a more expensive way to fulfill, right? But you have last mile shipments, you have a delivery van that's following you to your house, right? That is inherently much more expensive and inefficient. And so if the experience isn't there, I just don't know what the value proposition is beyond maybe just the accessibility of products that maybe you just wouldn't have had access to ordinarily, which is great for D2C. I think brands have to reclaim that customer experience piece if you want to see those the percentage of retail that e-commerce makes up. I think right now in the US, it floats around like 15, 16, 17%. Like ideally you need that thing somewhere near like 40% to have a sustainable trend. And if you want it to get there, you can't have people saying that the experience is as good or worse online than it is in store. If it's that way, you're going to go right back to brick and mortar, and all these brands that have made their livelihoods on the internet are going to really struggle, and you're going to struggle to have new brands open.
No question about it. And I think everybody was under the impression, I certainly wasn't under this illusion, but I think a lot of brands were mistakenly under the expectation that the accelerated trend of e-commerce adoption that was driven by COVID, that exploded TAM, the total addressable market for e-commerce, and it went from like that sub 20% range to 80% overnight in terms of TAM for online sales. And everybody and their dog jumped into the space, and everybody thought that new accelerated trend line was going to stay consistent. It was going to continue to be up and to the right, but off of that new base. And I think what we all learned was that people crave physical experiences still. And the reality is that people have returned to retail in their masses, and it's over 75% of retail is still done in physical spaces. And so we are still back to the old world in the sense that we have to create a differentiated online experience, and it has to be better. It has to be amazing. It has to be wonderful at every step, right from the point of consideration, right through the point of browsing, shopping, inspiration, aspiration, finding the product we want and need, adding it to our cart, getting checked out and paid. And increasingly, that experience is being dominated by marketplaces. And one of the benefits of marketplaces is being able to shop from multiple vendors in one cart, one payment, one shipment in many cases, and being able to have that all turn up at our doorstep conveniently and easily. And so increasingly, these D2C brands who either also sell on marketplaces or don't, they are increasingly not only competing with physical retail, they're not only competing with their other category or brand competitors, but they're also competing with marketplaces in many respects who are trying to bring a totally new level of ease and convenience to the online game. And so a lot of these D2C brands that are trying to do direct-to-consumer e-commerce, they're getting squeezed right in the middle. So opportunities to differentiate in that middle spot, they're few and far between. And one of the ways to do that is through the delivery experience, right?
Yeah. So I couldn't have said it better myself. One of the issues that you run into is, Every channel you add obviously adds complexity, right? So if you sell on your own website, you sell on Walmart.com, you sell on Amazon.com, you've added operational complexity, right? You're managing multiple channels of fulfillment. You've got inventory in different warehouses all over the country. This becomes infinitely more complex. The other thing it does is the switching cost on the internet is basically zero, meaning me as a consumer, right? If I go and I want to buy a pair of, I want to buy this sweater, and this sweater is sold on sweaters.com. It's also sold on Amazon. It's also sold on Walmart. If I order from sweaters.com, which is the channel that you as the business owner want me to order from because it's your highest margin channel with the greatest amount of control over the experience, and I have a bad one, there's a lot of data that shows that like you will flee and you might still buy a sweaters.com sweater, but you'll buy it on Amazon because you know what the consistency of the experience is on Amazon. And what does every seller complain about? The Amazon takes the whole cake. Like you get almost nothing off of selling on those channels. So if you are selling in a multi-channel strategy and you allow your customers to go through bad experiences, then you end up in a spot where they may still be buying your product, but they're buying it from you in your least profitable channels. And that's a problem for you if you want to grow sustainably and profitably and not be reliant on outside capital.
There's brands would ideally like to flow. They would like to use marketplaces as a customer acquisition channel, convert those into direct customers through some sort of incentivization. Maybe it's a QR code insert in the box that says, hey, here's a coupon for 20% off on our website, and here's our website, click this, whatever it might be. And so they're willing to oftentimes pay this ultra premium to be on all these other channels to tap into new markets. But ultimately, they want to drive traffic and demand and stickiness to their owned channels as opposed to effectively their rented or leased channels. And as a result of that, the expectation when a customer moves from a marketplace channel back to an owned channel, their expectation is automatically higher, right? Because they're used to the Amazon-like experience. I do 90+% of my shopping online. Now, I realize I'm a little bit of an outlier because I work in the industry and I hate physical shopping, but the reality is that there's a certain cohort of customers out there that are like me that do the vast majority of their shopping online. And so I have had a massive breadth of experiences shopping online in the US, in Mexico, in New Zealand, in Australia. I've had global online shopping experiences, and I've had global online shopping experiences for delivering in country to family that lives all around the world as well. And so I guess I've had not only experiences through marketplaces, but through D2C e-commerce experiences in multiple regions, multiple brands, multiple categories. And one of the reasons why I still, now that I'm in Mexico, one of the reasons that I spend probably 80% of my online spend with Amazon isn't necessarily because they have the best price, because many times they do not. There's two reasons I shop with them: breadth of product range and trust. I know that Amazon will get it to me usually 99% of the time when they say they're going to get it to me. And if they don't, they make it super, super easy, and they are totally proactive every step of the way. They will update the delivery date in the app so that every time I log in, I will see an updated expectation when it's going to get to me. I will be able to click through, track it. I will seize an additional delay. They will proactively tell me, and they will say, look, if it doesn't turn up within the next 2 days, you can automatically apply for a refund or a credit. They will proactively take all these steps from the point where I press the buy now button to the time that thing is literally in my hands, and they will communicate it to me as soon as it was in theory in my hands to let me know, hey, this in theory is in your hands. Did it actually arrive into your hands or not? And so I think there's still a lot of brands that they continue to underestimate the trust factor associated with shopping online. It's not that most consumers today assume they're going to be completely ripped off and never receive anything from a brand if they shop online. We're well past that. But there still is trepidation around, okay, if this goes wrong, how painful is it going to be for me to make it right? Because I don't think the brand is necessarily going to be proactive in making it right. I'm going to have to make the effort to make it right. Whereas in the Amazon world, if something goes wrong, they proactively make it right. And that's the difference.
There's a ton of data that supports what you're saying. There's actually a great Wall Street Journal article that came out like 2-3 days ago about customer expectations around returns this year. And did you have a chance to read?
No.
So I'll send you the link after we're done recording here, but it's super interesting because they talk about like how customers are in the weeds on your websites shipping and returns policy details like they have never been before. They specifically quote a toy store owner in Wisconsin who started to charge customers $8 per return, and he got blown up by customers with, what are you doing? Like, I'm not paying $8 to return this toy. This needs to be free, blase, blase. And then in the next line, he gets scammed by a person that returns an empty Lego box who bought a $1,000 collectible Lego set. And so there's this, you're totally right. There is a trust issue between consumers and brands, but there's also a trust issue between brands and consumers, right? So that's one of the things that we identified really early was, hey, there are other examples of where the trust factor is really high. Where are those? Amazon is a great one that you mentioned. Uber is actually one of the best examples of this, right? Uber created one of the greatest two-sided marketplaces that's like ever existed. If you would have told somebody 30 years ago, hey, I know you just had a kid, and when your kid is 20, you're gonna be putting them into a stranger's car when they're too drunk to walk. And like that stranger is gonna drive your kid home, and it's gonna be the cheapest and best way you're gonna be able to move around. They would have told you were insane. Right?
And
like
you're going to be able to order it from a cell phone in your pocket and track it from the time of collection to the time of getting your child home.
Exactly. And why does it work? It works because there's a lot of trust between drivers and riders, right? Like they spend all of their effort making sure that drivers trust the riders and riders trust the drivers. And so I think you're hitting on something. Actually, one of our customers, he and I were talking the other day about trust issues, and he hit on the same thing. I feel like it's just a consumer. He's a car guy, and he fixes all his own stuff up in his garage. Like he has old Land Rovers, like that whole kind of thing. And he was looking for some parts because he's fixing up an old military Humvee with one of his buddies. And he's, man, the only people that make this are these like one or two weird shops or whatever. And I don't know if this thing is the right part I need. The returns policy seems sketchy. Like, I'm not really sure. So he ended up not buying it. And he went to a military surplus store instead to try to see if he could find something. And you sit there and you're like, man, you lose a sale as a really small brand over returns policy that you probably might have made on ChatGPT anyway. So there's a lot of things that brand owners, I think, should really be intentional about and pay attention to. And then there's also the component that we're trying to help solve, which is around brands being able to trust people, right? This whole issue of first party fraud and people lying to you and saying that they didn't get a thing, they didn't receive their package, but they actually did. We have numerous brands who've come to us and said, we have one who saw his baby stroller being used by a person on Facebook who had claimed a loss and who he had refunded for the product. And those things sting and they make you jaded. And if you don't have a way of trusting your customer and you don't have a deep breadth of data, then you're not going to be able to make the kinds of decisions that you need to be making as a business owner, which to the earlier part of our conversation is like, how do I make this experience the best it can possibly be? Because you're going to start assuming that everyone's lying to you, everyone's full of shit, which is not true. But those edge
like
cases are, but it feels like it, right? Those edge cases are going to eke in. And part of the reason it feels like it is because what tends to happen is like you get a brand, they have a super generous return policy, super generous shipping policy, whatever it is, right? Whatever policy it is, they're very generous on. People see that, they aggregate in like Telegram groups and all these WhatsApp channel or the Telegram channels, WhatsApp groups, whatever. And they'll say, oh, this retailer, you can order from them and then you can say that you didn't get it and they'll just refund you. And they'll refund you. And we think the limit's around $200 or something where they just won't even look into it. And so you'll get hit with a wave of all of this at once. We see it all the time. It's like primarily the driver of why people end up coming to us is they get hit with a wave of these. And then if you just can show that you're taking proactive steps to deal with it, they'll leave you alone. Like you'll actually face less pressure because people pick up that you're monitoring and then they back off, right? Because they're not really trying to like It's like a bank run, right? If there's no cash at the bank, no one shows up for the bank run. But if he
Or it's
thinks
like an
there's still
alarm light
dollars,
on a car, right?
yeah,
People started
exactly.
putting the flashing red light in their cars even if they didn't have an alarm, because a thief that walks past a car, why would I bother trying to break into a car that even potentially has an alarm when there's 50 cars right next to it that have no alarm, no light, no nothing? And why would I take an unnecessary risk? And so I think, to your point, what you're trying to say is effectively, don't be a soft touch, don't be a mark, basically,
Yep,
as a brand.
exactly.
And if you are even the tiniest bit more proactive than your competitors, for example, then you are not going to be a mark, and therefore people aren't going to effectively be taking the piss out of you because of your generous returns policy.
Exactly. That's why we typically see loss reductions of 70 to 85% when we onboard people. And I think a lot of that is just because, to your point, it's you're not a mark anymore. So like the run stops. At least it stops in like the waves that it was before. You still get one-offs that you have to deal with, and you deal with them more effectively too. But most of it, I think, is just the change in human behavior that's caused by people understanding that you're not a mark.
You're not a soft touch. You're easy to take advantage of. I almost think of it
Exactly.
as like a fire break, right? Yeah,
Yep.
through the forest, they cut these fire breaks because when a forest fire starts, they don't want it to burn the whole mountainside down. They want it to just burn
Mm-hmm.
down to the fire break, and then it stops. And so I feel like you're a circuit breaker of sorts within this whole, uh, in many cases, it's actually organized crime syndicates
Yep.
doing, not always, but in many cases it is. There's these global crime syndicates that their entire sole purpose for being is to take advantage of soft touch e-commerce merchants who don't have the automations, they don't have the tools, they don't have the capacity or capability in place to deal with these item not received claims, combined with the fact that they have ultra generous returns, refund policies, and dealing with situations like this because they're trying to compete with the likes of Amazon through offering a better service than what Amazon can provide. And so they're getting burned at both ends of the scale, right?
Yep. You're 100% correct. And like one of the things that's when you are on a marketplace like an Amazon or a Walmart, Amazon or Walmart is owning the customer relationship, right? Which means that Amazon and Walmart collects all the data on all the customers. So if you, me, and everybody else and 1,000 other people are selling on Amazon, Amazon knows my neighbor's behavior on Amazon.com for all 1,000 sellers. But you as a D2C merchant don't get that. So you lose that advantage when you go off platform and you try to sell through your own channels. I think fundamentally, if I were to describe what we try to do or what we do in like a tweet, the old 140 characters, it's we give you the platform advantage, right? We are taking the aggregated insights across our network. And because we're not the platform and we don't benefit personally from selling, using that data to sell, we can provide it back to you in a way that you won't get from Amazon and Walmart. So I think we can give you a better version of the platform advantage because we're not the ones that are making the sales ourselves, right? This is why I think that Shopify is ultimately going to win out in the end, because I think it takes the best parts of platform aggregation, but it leaves behind the things that exploit the brands and the retailers, like you commonly hear complaints about with some of the other major marketplaces.
Wow. And you point out here, and I wasn't aware of this data point, but I think it's worth calling it out. According to industry data, for every INR, which is item not received, claim from a customer, merchants incur expenses equivalent to more than 200% of the item's original value. And back to your point, that's why so many merchants will, up to a certain value, they'll say, well, look, up to a certain value, it doesn't actually make sense for us to even bother investigating this claim. Let's just give them a refund, or let's just send out a brand new item. And then that's our standard response. If it's under $200 or it's under $100 or whatever it is, if it's under our AOV or whatever it is, let's just deal with this in the most expedient way possible. Because at the end of the day, even if we do investigate this, it's gonna be worth to us more than 200% of the item's original value, which means we're losing twice for every time we go ahead and investigate one of these loss claims. And so I think that there's kind of four areas here where you have called out that your platform helps merchants not only cut those costs, but have a smart way of better assessing whether a claim is going to be legit in the first place or is legit in the first place before they even assign any manual time to following up on that at all. And there, to be fair, there's always going to be situations where you will need to follow up on something manually. But I guess having a filter in there that can do a lot of the heavy lifting before it gets to that point is what you're trying to provide, right?
Exactly. So like at first we built this thing as this preventative API. Coming from my experience working in the blockchain and the crypto world, there's a lot of these companies, Chainalysis, TRM Labs, they're huge unicorn, multi-billion dollar valuation companies that have these risk scoring APIs. So I thought like a similar thing for e-commerce, like we'll put a risk scoring API.
Risk analysis, heuristics, and all that stuff.
Exactly. Like when an order comes in, we risk screen it. It gets the appropriate tags applied. You can create workflows off of those. You can change delivery instructions. You can make signature required. You can cancel orders. You can do all sorts of different things to try to deal with the risk heuristics that show you. What I didn't anticipate was that a lot of our customers weren't just using it to create workflows, but they were using it, they were piping the data over to their CX teams to say, hey, we're like when a customer ticket comes in and it's got one of these risk tags associated with it, then it immediately slides over for a manual review. So regardless of its price, right? So basically, instead of saying that the arbitrary threshold is a dollar amount, it's a risk rating. And so then the high risk stuff gets reviewed. And so we actually spent the last 3 months pumping out new features, and we developed an app on Gorgeous, which is like what most of our customers use for their CX management, specifically just to address this, because we saw so many customers that were doing this very manually and it took them a long time. We were like, we can give this to you on the side screen of your Gorgeous ticket. Sits, if you have our application on Shopify, we give you the Gorgeous plugin so you can see what is the risk heuristics on this order. And then you can give us feedback. So you can immediately say, this person has just submitted a really sketchy claim, or I think this person committed returns fraud, or this person is doing bracketing, all sorts of things related to potentially negative experiences. And then we can share that across the rest of our network, so every other merchant benefits, right? So the idea is like the more and more merchants that you add on and the more and more shipments that we're monitoring, like the better the product is for each additional merchant that onboards and each one that's been on previously.
Wow. And I guess then you can also plumb out data out of your platform, not only just into systems like Gorgeous, but maybe into your marketing automation platform or into your CDP platform as a profile property, as an overall risk source. So for example, if a brand has what appears to be the same value of customer in their system, roughly. They spend roughly the same amount per year. They have roughly the same AOV. They roughly have the same amount of contacts with customer service per order. So their cost to serve seemingly seems very similar. So therefore, our net profit from each of these two customers looks very similar. So we think we're going to market to them in very similar ways. But if I have more enriched data on one customer around their return rates, their likelihood to commit fraud, etc., then all of a sudden, maybe I'm not going to incentivize this customer to buy with me as often, but I am going to incentivize this other customer who has a lower cost of service, a lower risk of fraud, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe I'm going to treat them differently, and I'm going to segment them differently, and I'm going to incentivize them to do business with me very differently as a result.
We have customers that are doing exactly that. And like to the point where one of them asked us, and we built a little custom thing for them around, because everything for us is around creating an end better consumer experience for your customers. So we had a customer that came to us and they were struggling for whatever reason with fulfilling packages on time to certain parts of the country, right? So like they were going through this thing where they would say it's a 3 to 5 business day shipping, and orders were consistently arriving on like business days 6, 7, 8. And so they know that means that those customers are churning off, they're not coming back. So we built them a little custom application that punches out discount coupons over email through Klaviyo for 20% off, 15% off, whatever they want to put in there, and then uses those same risk profiles to segment those customers out and then decide which percentage you get to come back and basically say, hey, this is not what you should expect shopping from us. We're really sorry about this. Here's how we're going to make it up to you. We're going to give you this 20% off coupon. It expires in 30 days. So the next time you need it was an energy drink company, but like the next time you need to re-up on energy drinks, like we're going to help you out. And that's because And then next time that order gets flagged for a higher priority shipping. So you definitely make sure that it gets there on time. And in that way, you're creating really strong long-term brand loyalty. Like, to me, that's more valuable as a loyalty metric than giving out Caesar's Palace dollars or Disney bucks. To some of these loyalty programs I see where it's like you assign somebody like Bobby dollars. I don't really sure if I have Bobby dollars, I'm going to go use them. But to me, the thing that is more important in loyalty is the consistency of the experience against what the expectation is that you set up front, right? Like, to your point about Amazon, the reason that everybody loves Amazon is because it's so remarkably consistent. It's also the reason people love McDonald's. McDonald's is never bad. It's never the best meal you've ever had, but it is never the worst thing you've ever eaten, right?
Yeah.
It is remarkably consistent everywhere you go.
From a health perspective, it might be.
It is poison. You probably shouldn't eat it, but there is a reason why, like, when you're on the road and people travel, there is a reason why McDonald's is like the go-to, right?
You see the golden arches, and within reason, the exact experience you're going to get.
Exactly. It's super, super consistent. And it doesn't have to be the greatest, but it is consistent. It would be better if it was better, you know, but consistency is the thing. How much does McDonald's have to spend to acquire a customer? At this point, probably nothing.
Yes.
I don't really know how much. I don't really know what I know they're on TV ads, but I don't really know how much of that you really need to do outside of you're just delivering a consistent product to the same people over and over.
Generational brand experience.
Exactly.
It's consistent. No, I totally agree with you. And when a customer, so you've got Klaviyo integration, you've got Gorgeous integration, you've got Shopify integration. Are there any other e-commerce platforms that you guys already integrate with, or are there any e-commerce platforms on your radar to integrate with?
Not that we already integrate with. On our radar would be other CX applications like Zendesk, Salesforce Commerce Cloud. We have an API that we've published for. We have some enterprise clients that are outside of the Shopify space that we publish an API for. If you're not on one of those platforms, then we can still support you. But I think Salesforce Commerce Cloud, really wherever our customers tell us that we need to be to support them, is where we're going to be.
Makes complete sense. But being part of that Shopify ecosystem, especially from a B2C, D2C perspective, is definitely the place to be, and being able to leverage the app ecosystem there is pretty amazing. In terms of functionality, is there anything you don't do today that your customers are asking you to do, or is there any gaps in the market that you're seeing that you say, oh, we don't do this today, but in 6 or 12 months, we will be doing this thing because we see this as a massive opportunity for us?
That's a really great question. There's a lot of features that we're currently working on that our customers have asked us for. One example is better rules engine. I thought and assumed that Shopify Flow had a lot greater adoption than it actually does in practice. And I've told this to the Shopify development support team, like, you guys really need to put out more education on Shopify Flow, because the amount of operators I see that can't even set up the basic order is high risk by Shopify's own metric, cancel order, right? Like that one that is, you should see universally across every single Shopify store, you don't necessarily see across every single Shopify store. And so I think, so we built a rules engine that is much more simple and a lot more
user-friendly,
drop downs, and a little bit more user-friendly, where you don't have to think about the flow of things, because we know the flows that we're trying to design, and we used to have to build them for everyone we onboarded. We were like, instead of doing this, we'll just build our own interface. You can click, I want to do X when blank, because blank, over blank dollar with blank product. So that is something that we're going to be churning out at the end of this month, which is really exciting and something that our customers have asked for. There's always other areas of exploration. Things that I find personally interesting are the buy online, pick up anywhere concept. If we had a certain number of our customers that came to us and said, we would love to do buy online, pick up anywhere, I would love to build that, because I think that there's a lot of value, particularly if you think about the customer experience for folks who live in, there's this great New York Times and Wall Street Journal article on porch piracy, and it seems specifically around AT&T phones that came out a few weeks ago. And I think there was a line in there where they said it's like a luxury in New York City to be able to receive a package. That's crazy. Like, mail packages,
especially with parcel lockers nowadays, it shouldn't be a luxury.
No, it should not be a luxury at all. And so I think the kind of buy online, pick up anywhere things are interesting to me, because you can blend the online and in-person experience and get the best of both worlds. Maybe there's opportunities for upsell if you are a historically brick and mortar retailer. I'm thinking like an American Eagle or like a Abercrombie or something, I don't know, that has like stores everywhere. Maybe it's worth it for you to put in parcel lockers into your store, receive other packages, and then maybe you try to hook people into. So I think there's really interesting opportunities in that space that I would love to explore.
Yeah, makes complete sense. No, that totally makes sense. This is a space I to be fair and total transparency, I've never worked with your platform before, so I had to learn about it by what's on the tin, what's on the website. This is clearly an issue. Do you guys have any competitors in the marketplace? Very rarely do software vendors work in an isolated market of one. Do you guys feel like you're doing something completely novel here? Because there's a lot of platforms that work on the delivery tracking side. They can automate the claims with carriers side. They can automate the returns process with like loops returns, and can automate the customer experience associated with that by having a tracking page on the site or a returns management page on the website. So there's lots of players that do lots of different things in this orbit, but I don't think I've ever come across on 450 plus episodes of this podcast, I don't think I've ever come across a platform that specifically addresses or tries to address the item not received type of scenario.
Not to my knowledge, which is crazy. Maybe that means I'm insane. I'm out on the edge of a cliff somewhere. One of our investors, we joke about that all the time, that like we're the only people willing to beat our heads through the wall enough to try to solve the problem. So yeah. And to your point about some of those other folks, we work with a lot of them and have partnerships with a lot of the different automations managers, just because it helps them out a lot, right? If there's less claims, like everybody's happy.
Yeah, everybody wins.
Everybody wins.
Wow. Yeah, obviously integrating with carrier aggregators and returns platforms and everything else, being able to pull in additional data from those tools, which they have their own unique data sets that go over and above what your data sets are. If you can pull in their data and share your data with them, then man, everybody wins. It's a virtuous cycle. No, super exciting, man. How do you make your money? Like you're a SaaS platform, but how do you charge? Is it on a per parcel basis? Is it on a per protected INR basis? Like how do you charge for your platform?
We charge a monthly fee, just a flat monthly fee for a Shopify application. That's really all it is. We have some pricing tiers, obviously based on like your volume, and then the amount of, really it comes down to the amount of CS that we're going to provide. Like at a certain level of brand, under a few hundred orders a month, like I just, unfortunately, like we can't spend a lot of time to building custom workflows.
There's
for
no
you.
white glove service or anything available.
Yeah, exactly. We even have a free tier below 250 orders a month where we'll just let you use the software for free. And then when you grow into a brand where eventually you need some assistance, like then we'll start charging. But we really just want to be able to provide everybody with the ability to access this kind of advantage. And so, yeah, that's how it works.
And so let's say I'm a brand and I'm doing 10,000 orders a month, roughly. How much would I be expecting to pay for your platform? Just ballpark.
It's roughly 600 a month.
All right. Okay, cool. All right. So yeah, I'm guessing that at that point, then the value is pretty clear and present that if you can prevent even 3 or 4 instances of fraud, you've probably paid for yourself depending on what your AOV is. Because if it costs me as a brand over 200% of the value of an item for every INR claim that I process manually, and my AOV is $200, then I'm spending $400 just to process manually one of these claims. It doesn't take too many of those to justify the cost in investing in your software, does it?
No. And like we aim to provide 10 times the amount of value for what we charge. So like when we pick that price point of 600 for the category that you're talking about, it's because our customer data shows that we would be saving you like 10 times that amount. And right. So the expectation is that we are going to provide far more value back to you than we ever extract. And I think that's like those win scenarios that you were talking about, beyond just like incident management and the cost of that. When you talk about retargeting and remarketing, you're removing those people from the pool in the first place. There is a lot more to it than just like the number of claims that you've prevented. There's a lot more. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot more value that gets provided that's a little bit harder to place your thumb on, but you will see it in the aggregate over time with our product.
Yeah, you decreased INR rate. That's just one way to look at it, because all of a sudden now you're going to be able to treat those customers or those potential customers very differently as part of, but not only the purchasing workflow, but also the fulfillment workflow. Big difference. So yeah, it makes complete sense. Listen, I will drop a link to your LinkedIn profile into the show notes, as well as the Deliverlitics link in the show notes. But other than that, if people want to speak to you about this whole challenge that they're having within their business around preventable item not received claims, how is the best way to get a hold of you and have that discussion?
Over LinkedIn or Twitter. You can find me there, Bobby McKinnon, if you want to see some of the more unhinged thoughts. And then, yeah, you just reach out to us, hello@deliverlitics.com.
Too easy. Well, listen, it's been an amazing conversation. I've learned a ton. This is an area that I'm definitely not an expert in, and that's one of the reasons I love doing this podcast, because I learn something new every single time I speak to an amazing guest like you. Now, as we come down to the end of our time together, and an hour is absolutely blasted by, this is where I get the chance to flip the script, hand the microphone over to you, let you ask me one question. Any question you like, can be personal or professional. Mr. Bobby McKinnon from Deliverlitics, what is your question for me today?
I'm going to steal my favorite question of all time from the great Peter Thiel and ask you, what is something that nobody else believes you?
As a certified conspiracy theorist, there's probably many things out there, but look, it's an interesting one.
There's another version of this question, which is, what great business doesn't currently exist? If you prefer to answer that one instead.
Wow, that's a great one too. Look, there's a lot of businesses that I didn't think existed until I had them on my podcast, and you're one of them. So I had no idea that a business like yours existed. So I'm learning new businesses every day are coming onto my radar that I didn't think exist, didn't know existed, and didn't even know they needed to exist until they came onto my radar. So that's certainly an interesting space. I think for me, practical AI, and I'm going to go there. I shouldn't, but I'm going to go there. I think practical AI, I've actually started a new company just recently with a friend of mine. We both worked in the e-com and digital space for many decades. And what we are finding is that identifying practical AI application opportunities is harder than it first seems. Like, it's all great and fine and good, and we all like Dolly, and I'm a Chat GPT Plus subscriber and all the rest. And look, they're great, and they all have their pros and their cons. And look, Gemini's okay, and there's some semi-useful stuff out there. And even Dolly helps me generate, for example, at the drop of a hat, I can generate unique cover art for every single podcast episode, whereas before generative AI, that I wouldn't do that. I would just have a standard cover art for every single episode. So there's like little applicable things there, but it's really all about the apps. I feel like AI is having its smartphone moment. By that, when smartphones first came out, they weren't that useful because they didn't have really well-developed app stores. They didn't have well-developed a well-developed app ecosystem. And it's all about the apps on your smartphone, whether it's an iPhone or whether it's an Android or whatever it is. They're dumb phones until you take into account the app ecosystem that has sprung up around them with the really useful apps on that phone that take it above and beyond being a standard telephony and texting device, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like AI is going through that moment right now where there's billions of dollars being poured into it. But I feel like the saying that came out about the same time the smartphones came out, it's all about the apps, stupid, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel it's exactly the same about AI. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why, for example, Shopify is winning. It's a double-edged sword in the sense that there's almost never a Shopify project that I'm ever involved with that doesn't include at least between 20 and 30 apps. And there are some negatives to that in the sense that lots of merchants feel like they're being nickel and dime to death, and they're being killed by the monthly app fees that they have to pay. But the reality is there's over 12,000 apps now in the Shopify App Store. Now, if between a combination of native Shopify features combined with one of over 12,000 apps, if you can't get Shopify to do what you need it to do, you may not need it to be done. And so the reality is, I feel, and this is a long-winded way of saying, I think AI really needs to have a more unified and universal app ecosystem before it becomes really useful to the majority of everyday users. Now, there's an aside to this, which is that a lot of clients come to me, and I'm consulting, like 99% of my consulting is now to B2B sellers, not B2C or D2C sellers. But most of the merchants I work with will come to me and they'll say, "Hey, Jason, what about this AI thing? How do we get AI into my business?" And I'm like, you don't need to think about that. Every single tech vendor that you work with is already breaking their back to figure out how to get AI into their technology. You don't need to think about going and signing up for a subscription to AWS AI and figuring out how to get that integrated into your stack. Every single one of your app vendors is already panicking about becoming irrelevant if one of their competitors brings AI into their technology faster than they do. So all you need to do is continue to consume the technology that you're already consuming, and AI is going to make its way into your business whether you like it or not. So that's my take on where we're at from a technology perspective, especially as it relates to AI, which it feels like everybody and their dog is talking about AI right now. And in fact, almost every single technology vendor that I work with today as a client or as a partner, they will tell you that basically, unless you have AI in your name, you are not going to be getting venture funding right now.
Yeah, I've heard similar things. And it's funny that you say that it needs the app ecosystem moment, because I have the take on it that it's reselling intelligence, which is effectively what a consulting firm is, right? Or an investment banking firm, right? It's like you are reselling. Consulting is probably the more applicable one. Investment banking, you're reselling relationships. And in a way with consulting, you are too. But I think about something like a McKinsey or a Bain, right? You're reselling intelligence, but the reason why executives pay those consulting firms is it's a CYA. If Bain told me to do it, I'm not getting fired if it doesn't.
You're outsourcing risk. That's all you're doing.
So I think that ChatGPT is reselling intelligence, and what it needs to be doing is really selling a CYA.
Yes.
So whenever that point is where like people trust the results of ChatGPT or whatever AI interface as much as they do the MBB or the big four consulting firms, I think that's like the tipping point where it becomes now there's no way those firms can compete with something that's producing the intel for
or they're going to be developing their own internal agents, their own chat technology on top of their internal cohort of knowledge.
Exactly. And then it'll just be partners in AI agents, and all those junior ranks will disappear from those firms.
Totally could not agree more. And I've said this for ages. I'm not too worried about it as a boutique consultancy. I'm not worried about it, but I think there's change coming. And in fact, when you sign up to expert marketplaces like a GLG, which I'm a member of a number of expert marketplaces that effectively resell my expertise to their customers, that most of them have already forced their consultants to sign off on saying, hey, look, the moment you agree to a consulting engagement through our firm, like a GLG, we record every session and it's going into training our AIs. So the reality is it's already coming. They're already trying to monetize and remonetize that knowledge that they were only able to monetize once on a consulting call that you did through them. They want to be able to remonetize that in ad infinitum forever without having to pay you again a cut.
I've heard, I don't remember who it was, if it was Elon or one of those guys, but somebody made this comment about AI that basically everybody that does anything will sell their labor to train the robot or the AI or the whatever, do that skill. So if you're a plumber, it'll almost be like a branded thing. So you'll have a plumbing robot that if Bobby's the plumber, I might teach the robot by letting it record all of what I do plumbing over the next 3 years. And then Bobby bots become like the standard plumbing unit. And there's going to be like a couple of winners and a ton of losers in that marketplace, which makes me somewhat skeptical, from a societal level, whether or not that's actually going to work. But I do think smart people who are in some of these, who do things like that, boutique consulting or whatever it is, whatever your niche is, if you can become the branded thing of your niche, then you can be
you'll be able to license it effectively.
Yeah. You'll basically be able to license your expertise and understanding to the AI that then resells it, because that's the trust component that enables somebody to take the buying step and then implement the tool, the robot, the whatever it is.
Man, I love that. Crazy. Listen, this has been a really fascinating conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I can't wait to speak to you again soon.
Same here. Thanks for having me.
Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.